Welcome back to the All the Way Life. I'm your host, Samuel Andrews. It's good to be with you. We have in our studio today, our mobile studio today, Andy Chan, PhD. Thank you for being here, Andy.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're with a program called Books to Prisoners. Can you tell us how they got started?
Yeah, sometime around 1972 or 1973, there'd been some actions by the Black Panthers and another similar group in the Puget Sound area. And some activists, local activists, decided to get together to do some prisoner support work. And the thing that they came up with was Books to Prisoners. And the people who created Books to Prisoners very soon after that went on to set up the bookstore Left Bank Books, which is still in Pike Place Market today. So Books to Prisoners started with very much a political activist perspective on things. Over the years, it's become slightly, certainly less political in its nature.
Let's talk about a little bit about the mission of Books to Prisoners. I mean, the premise is you give books to prisoners, but give us a little behind the reason for that.
Well, the motivation for people coming to Books to Prisoners and for the organisation itself to exist is quite individual. I mean, sort of people come in with their various motivations. Some people will come in because they love books and love working with books. Some people come in because they have a very much a prison background. For me personally, I think the idea is that I don't think that anybody is beyond redemption. I don't think anybody is beyond education. And a lot of the folks that we're dealing with, almost all of the folks that we're dealing with, are going to be getting out. And I would like the people who are getting out to have fostered an interest in their education, in their empowerment, in their self-esteem.
And that goes into my next question, because you're talking about rehabilitation in a way, which is something especially the U.S. justice system is not so big on. And as far as books, are you giving out educational books per se? Are you giving out novels? Or are you giving books on request? I gave you three different questions to deal with. Which one do you want to address first?
I'll try and cover them all, and if I don't cover them, you tell me. We send out all kinds of different books. Basically, people make their individual requests to us, and as best as we can, we try and fill those requests. It can purely be escapist fiction. Now, there's going to be some real value to escapist fiction for somebody who's locked up in four walls 24 hours a day. A lot of people are looking for educational, very specifically educational material in the academic sense of looking for their GED to the equivalent of graduating from high school, or college level texts on mathematics or science or whatever. But there was a bit of a debate several years ago about, well, should we try and confine ourselves to only non-fiction materials? And there was a very strong argument that fiction provides, an educational impetus as much as non-fiction stuff. Reading Jane Austen or Shakespeare or any of those things can be very educational. But if someone reads at an incredibly low level, and they need to read a Danielle Steele or a romance, just anything that will foster a love of reading, we think can be educational.
Mm-hmm. So they may request certain books from you?
Very much so, yeah. There are, many prisons do have prison libraries, but a lot of these prison libraries have had no budget, ever, or some of the better ones may not have had it for years and years and years. And so prisoners will be looking for specific things in their libraries and not finding them there at all. So we are one of the few outlets out there where they can actually request a subject, a genre, an author that really fits what they need for no charge. We make no charge for those books.
So we're at your location right now in Seattle, and we're surrounded by all these different types of books and boxes and boxes and boxes of books. So books are your life right now. I'm curious about the response you're getting from the prisoners?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, sort of certainly we don't do this because we're expecting to get lots of wonderful thank you letters and oh my gosh, you're so wonderful. That's not why we're doing this. But having said that, yeah, we do get quite a few thank you letters, some of which can be quite meaningful to us.
What's different about your approach? Because I was curious when I was planning for this interview if other people, other organizations were doing the same things that you were doing. Is there anyone else doing the same thing that you're doing?
There are several, quite a few groups around the country. For instance, Books to Prisoners, which was born and brought up in Seattle, has its own branches, one in Bellingham, one in Olympia, and one in Portland, Oregon. But there are some completely independent organisations which have sprung up on their own. There's a couple, there's one in Massachusetts and one in Philadelphia, which have been around for more or less the same length of time that Books to Prisoners has. There's one in Austin, Texas, which has been around a long time, a couple in California. So they're all over, and because they're independent, we all have a slightly different philosophical views on things. Some are more political than others, and some again stick to perhaps just fiction. Some stick to just political stuff. There's variations, but they're not terribly huge variations.
And so what you're doing, what might be different from the others, is that you are providing different types of books of various subjects. For example, there's nothing wrong with that, but a Christian organization might provide only Christian books, and you are providing more of a wide array of books.
Yeah, actually, when you bring up the subject of religious materials, that's one area that we actually do de-emphasize. We do have a religious section. It's not very big, and we certainly don't ask, when we're looking for donations, we never ask for religious materials, and the primary reason for that is because there are so many religious organizations out there proselytizing and doing missionary work and providing religious texts, and if they are willing to spend money doing it and getting their word out, that's fantastic. It means that we don't have to spend the very limited resources that we have on sending out those materials.
How many years have you been doing this? Volunteering?
Me personally? Yeah, me personally, I've been doing it since 1994, essentially, when I got off a boat in Seattle. I don't know if you get off a boat. Yes, you do. Of course you can. Basically, as soon as I got here, I went to Left Bank Books and I just said, hey, I'm looking for something meaningful to do. What should I do? And they said, well, you know what, Books to Prisoners, just go there, and they always need volunteers.
So as far as looking for people who might be interested in donating and supporting you, what would be the motivation? I know you talked about that a little bit earlier, but could you talk more about the motivation of someone who would want to donate and why it's important?
Yeah, well, we find most of our financial donors tend to be on the, let's say, liberal side of the political spectrum, but I always think that this isn't necessarily a partisan issue, because again, as I say, unless you're locking up people forever and ever and ever, and they're never ever going to get out, they're going to get out. So my argument to a conservative or a Republican would be to say, what are you trying to achieve? What is going to create a better person when they come out rather than a worse person? Do you want them to have just learnt other skills of the trade from other criminals in prison, or do you want them just some kind of a spark to have been put inside them for something else? And that's one of the things that we hope to do. Motivation for other people, it's hard to say exactly. I mean, people are motivated again specifically by the books and the interest, and just thinking that people love books, so we want to send books to people who love books and don't have good access to books. And there are some other people who I think will donate on the basis of the idea of rehabilitation, and this is what they want to achieve for the people in prison.
We're talking with Dr. Andy Chan, PhD, with the Books to Prisoner program. As far as the cycle of people returning to prison, people are coming out and they're not able to find a job. I know this is not what you do, but we have to broach this because we're talking about rehabilitation, right, as I see it. So people coming out, not being able to find a job, becoming frustrated, reoffending, going back into jails. And is there an aspect of that that you're trying to interrupt, if you can, maybe by educating someone while they're in prison?
Sure. I mean, what we can do is just an incredibly small sliver of a gigantic picture. You know, as I said, we're hopefully providing a spark, or we're feeding a fire for knowledge, for education, for looking for something else. There's other organisations such as which creates, which are looking to get people into college, and there's other organisations which are working to change laws. Just recently, the law that legalised marijuana in Washington State was partially funded by some folks who have donated to Books to Prisoners, and their motivation was not necessarily because they loved marijuana, but because they understood how many lives had been destroyed in the war on drugs, you know, from people, you know, being arrested for marijuana things. And again, they're only dealing with a small part of it, but, you know, sort of mandatory sentencing laws for harder drugs. There's people working on those kind of things. So again, there's people taking little chunks of each of these things and hoping that they can influence the population in general, and politicians who make these various rules that stick people in prison without education, without means to rehabilitate, and sticking them in for incredibly long periods of time, or in isolation units and things like that, none of which will create a better person.
So, back to the question before, I think you answered quite well. I want to go a little bit further about why people who are frustrated with the system, people who actually maybe live in fear, and rightly so, because some people think that more conservatives, or anyone, regardless of their side of the spectrum, believe in incarceration as a solution. However, what you are talking about is some sort of humanitarian effort to use their time while they're incarcerated to become better, or basically to become better, or to contribute to society when they get out. And it's not just about, from what I'm hearing, them going to jail, getting what they deserve, and coming out and paying their debt to society. It's a little bit further, a little bit more than that, isn't it?
For me, I think it is. I think there's going to be people who do believe that prison should be only to punish people. And yeah, I understand the retributive way of looking at the criminal justice system. But again, it's to me, it's a very short-sighted way of looking at things, because I really don't believe that putting someone into solitary confinement for 20 years is going to turn them into a much better person when they come out, rather than an incredibly damaged person, an incredibly angry person, or a more damaged person than they were. So yeah, I understand the idea of punishment. I just don't think it's a very good way for society to act, you know, if that's the only thing that you can focus on.
I'm with Dr. Andy Chan with the Books to Prisoners program. And Dr. Chan, how about success stories? We talked about people being grateful a little bit from the books that you have provided. Does any particular success story come to mind? I'm looking at a binder here, just chocked full of letters of thanks from prisoners. Can you think of anyone particular that stands out?
Well, yeah, I can't. I mean, there's several that I can think of. The best ones that I ever remember seeing are the ones from people who have written after they've got out of prison. Because it's all very well somebody writing a thank you letter from prison, and some of them are fantastic and stuff, and really heartfelt, but you know, there's always maybe something in the back of your mind that says, well, sure, they're writing that because they'd like more books, you know. But the ones which really make a real difference to me are the ones where people have written after they've gotten out. There's no reason for them to thank us at that point in time unless we really meant something to them. And so I'm thinking of a couple that I've seen over recently where people have said, yeah, this made an awful lot of difference to me. My family, had disowned me, but you guys actually, sent me stuff that meant so much, and committed to making a change, and those kind of things. So those things are kind of touching. I also wanted to mention, probably the most powerful letter that I've ever seen, and I don't know. I don't know if I can say it was a success story. No, I can't say it was a success story, except in a kind of strange way. It was a letter from a prisoner in Texas, and I remember the date that he was written. It wasn't this year; it was a few years ago, but it was written on May the 10th. And again, it was just it was a heartfelt thank you for all the books that you've sent me over the years. Nothing was unusual about that, but the thing that made it really stand out was this guy, a little bit later on the letter, said that he was being executed on May the 15th. So, as one of his last acts on this world, he had written a thank you. And again, you don't do that unless something has been meaningful to you, unless it has changed you in some way.
He was very, very grateful for it. Are there any particular groups that reach out more as far as demographics to you, or are you covering the broad spectrum of every age in prison, or is there a specific group that benefits mostly?
Well, hopefully it's no huge surprise to you, Samuel, that there's an awful lot of black people in prison, in much greater percentage than is reflected in American society as a whole. So we get huge numbers of requests from people looking for black studies, which of course is difficult for us because our books are donated to us by society in general, and society in general does not read an awful lot of black studies books. So it's a constant struggle to find something for an overrepresented group in prison. Another example of that would be huge numbers of requests from Hispanic people, and certainly a lot of requests in Spanish for books in Spanish. And again, it's really difficult for us to get donations of a variety of different texts in Spanish.
So if people wanted to help you or to help out or in any way, they could also go book shopping and send the books to you? Or would you prefer to buy your own books? What would fit your model better?
We don't spend almost any money at all on buying books. Books are expensive things to buy, and finding exactly the book that we want is, it's an awful lot of time, and typically there's no shortage of books that we get donated. One thing I would stress to anybody listening is that we right at this point in time we don't want donations of just everything. There's things that we want which are very specific. So if people are looking to donate books to us, then they should go to our website and see specifically what we're looking for. Dictionaries, for instance. If people have paperback dictionaries that they don't need, we would love them, but boy, do we not need any more thrillers at the moment, for instance.
What is your web address?
www.bookstoprisoners.net.
So thank you so much for stopping in, or letting us stop in. We have to do that again. So thank you very much for letting us come in today and talk with you today. appreciate the work that you do.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for stopping in.